In the next hour, we want to put a smile on your face, elevate your endorphins, and bring you happiness. Welcome to Say Yes, Be Happy with Nathalie Botros. We spend so much of our lives chasing happiness, it might just be where you least expect it to be. Nathalie and her guests are going to show you how and where to find it. And now, your host, Nathalie Botros.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Nathalie Botros, your host. Welcome to my show, Say Yes, Be Happy, where each week we find the silver lining, the happy and the positive in our lives. And each week I try to find a different subject with amazing guests. And this week I have a real life astronaut. He is here because he dreamt about being an astronaut and he made it happen. So he said yes to life and yes to his dreams. And let me introduce you my guest. He served in the United States Air Force as a fighter pilot, test pilot, and NASA astronaut. He's one of only 4 astronauts to have piloted a Space Shuttle, flown a Russian Soyuz spacecraft, performed spacewalks, and commanded the ISS. And by the way, he spent more than 7 months in space. So, shooting much of the stunning footage himself, his photography is featured in his National Geographic book, View from Above. He recently directed his first film, One More Orbit, about his Guinness World Record breaking mission in July 2019, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And his latest book, How to Astronaut, the title of our show today, An Insider's Guide to Living Planet Earth, was released worldwide on September 15, 2020. Please welcome Colonel Terry Virts. Hello.
Nathalie, bonjour. It's so good to be here.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. I'm like so excited to have you. And I'm sure my listeners are like even more excited than I am. I keep receiving, all those calls and questions. But before getting to their questions, I have some questions for you. So let's start from the beginning. We know that most of the little girls and boys' dream is to become an astronaut. Mm-hmm. And was it your dream too?
It was, yeah. The first book I ever read was about Apollo, the moon missions. And so I grew up as a boy with pictures of galaxies and nebula, and I had a Space Shuttle Columbia poster on my wall, and I had an F-16 poster on my wall, the original 1974 F-16. So it's what I wanted to do ever since I was young.
Yeah. And so how did you transform that dream into reality?
So I'm really lucky. I mean, I'm one of those few people that got to do what they dreamt about when they were little. As I grew up, I would tell people I want to be an astronaut. And I was very lucky. I had parents that supported me. Nobody in my family really knew how to become an astronaut, but they supported me. They did things like they got me a telescope, and then I had to learn how to use a telescope. They got me a computer, an old TRS-80 computer when I was young. And so I had to teach myself how to program. And by giving me these things to do and then letting me do them on my own, that self-motivation and curiosity, I think, was the key to it. And then as I grew up, everybody would always kind of smile. Oh yeah, you want to be an astronaut, but you should really go be an accountant or something normal. And I would always just smile and kind of ignore them. And even as a test pilot, I was at Edwards Air Force Base as a test pilot, and everybody there wanted to be an astronaut. But we were young. The NASA said we're going to have a new class, and we were still students. We hadn't even graduated yet. And I went ahead and applied. A lot of my classmates said, I'm not going to apply this time. I'll wait till the next time. And long story short, I ended up getting selected, and they didn't. And there wasn't another class for a long time because of the accident, and a lot of other stuff happened. And so the lesson I learned, Nathalie, is don't tell yourself no. If there's some dream that you have to go for it. And you can't just say, oh, I want to be an astronaut. Like, there's steps you have to take. There's hard work you have to do. You need a technical degree. If you want to be a doctor, you can't just say that. You have to study certain things. So, but that first step really is don't tell yourself no, because a lot of people would roll their eyes. Oh, you're never going to be an astronaut. And the odds were super low. I didn't expect it to happen. But unless you take that first step, you're never going to get it.
I know. I mean, it's why I love your message, because I always say yes, and you say, don't say no. So, don't stay in your comfort zone. Try. What do you have to lose? Worst comes to worst. I mean, if you don't try, you lose anyway, you fail anyway. So try. So that's really amazing. I mean, I know that today, a lot of kids, like their dream, maybe it's not always to be an astronaut, but to be an influencer on TikTok or YouTube.
Right, exactly.
But I was like reading the statistic, actually 86% of kids, they still dream to do something with space. So we still have hope. Let's say
space is pretty cool. The TikTok thing, I mean, it's cool. You and I both have podcasts. I mean, but you know, that's not necessarily fulfilling for a lifetime. So there are other much cooler things.
Exactly. I agree. I totally agree. So I know that my listeners wants to know all about your 7 months in space. Let's dig in and like get like the little questions. First of all, how does the launch feel like?
So the first launch was on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. And I had been a fighter pilot and test pilot, and I thought I knew stuff. But man, when those engines lit up, I remember hearing this sound, and I remember thinking, wow, something significant's about to happen, because the main engines run for 6+ seconds before the shuttle actually lifted off. And then when you lift off, when the solid rocket motors went, nighttime turned into day. There were some clouds above us, so all the fire was reflecting off the clouds, and all of a sudden it was like it's daytime, and then you're smashed against your back. It's like laying on the ground and having your friends lay on top of you. The shuttle went up to 3 Gs. The Soyuz that I flew later was probably closer to 4 Gs. So it's a lot of pressure. And you can feel that, like in a race car, if you slam on the brakes or slam on the gas or turn, you feel maybe a 2 Gs maybe for like 1 second, and then it stops. But in the shuttle, it was 3 Gs, and that ride into space was 8.5 minutes. So it's a lot of pressure. You're vibrating. I remember looking out the window across the cockpit, and I saw the moon out the left window, and it was just the whole first chapter of my first book and several chapters in How to Astronaut are about that 8.5 minute ride into space, because it's pretty just amazing.
So it takes you 8.5 minutes to start the motion or to arrive?
No, to arrive. So when you lift off, you start your stopwatch, and 8.5 minutes, the engines shut down and you're floating in space.
Wow. It's faster than
at
planes.
Orbital speed.
Yeah.
At orbital speed. Now, these space tourists, so William Shatner, is going up, and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, and those guys go up and just for a few minutes, and they come straight back down. So they go a lot slower. They don't make it into orbit. But to get into orbit, it takes roughly 8.5 minutes.
Okay. And do you need, can anyone like go to space, or you need kind of a training to be strong? Because I'm sure like it's so powerful, so much shaking happening.
You want to be in pretty decent shape, although Mr. Shatner's 90.
I know.
They brought a lady, I think she was 89 on the last mission, which is fine, but there's stress on your body, and you don't want to be in bad shape, because your heart might stop, or if you just get excited, some people are gonna be, I don't know what word you want to use, freak out or excited. If you're launching on a rocket, that's gonna mentally, give you some stress. So I don't think you want to go into space unless you're in pretty decent shape. That's my advice anyway.
Yeah, no, of course. So you arrive to space, you're like 8 minutes after you're there. How does it feel? You live like all that long. How do you feel physically? Let's talk about, like the weightless life, the challenges.
So weightlessness is awesome. It's something that you can experience on Earth. You can jump off a diving board and you have about a second before you hit the water. If you're in an airplane, you can push forward. If you're going fast, you can get a few seconds of weightlessness, but then it ends. And in space, when they shut the engines down, it doesn't end until, for my case, 2 weeks later, or on my second flight, 200 days later. And that requires your brain to figure out what's going on. Our brains have the neurovestibular system that gives you balance has 3 inputs. One of them is visual. You look out, I can see there's the roof and there's the ground, and that's telling my brain which way's up. Another one is called somatosensory. So I can feel that I'm sitting in a chair, right? So I feel that pressure. So that's telling my brain which way's up and which way's down. And the third one are these semicircular canals in your ears. And they're 3 perpendicular canals, and they have fluid and hair, and you can close your eyes. I can't see anything, but I can still tell that I'm pitching my head and rolling and yawing. It's funny, the space shuttle and the F-16, a lot of airplanes have the same system. We're designed the same with rate gyro sensors. Anyway, in space, that system doesn't work, those semicircular canals, because there's no, and the somatosensory, you can't feel pressure when you on your butt. When you sit down in a chair, your butt can't tell which way's down.
Yeah.
So your brain is really confused because the vision is telling it one thing and these other things are sending in confused signals. So, man, I had the worst headache of my life my first 2 days in space. I could only move like about that fast. I couldn't move my head fast. It was terrible. Like I felt really awful. And a lot of people don't feel great. And then on the third morning, it was like a light switch went on and my brain figured it out. So somehow the neurons were rewiring themselves and they just figured out weightlessness. And then after that, for the rest of my shuttle flight, and 4 or 5 years later, I went back on the Soyuz, and on day one, I felt fine. So something about my brain learned weightlessness, which is a pretty cool process to go through.
Yeah, to do the switch. It's like, well, we adapt to almost everything. So actually, I guess like your brain adapted to the situation, and then like it's the memory of the brain afterwards. So, okay, but how is it like to eat, to sleep, to, Yeah.
Oh, there's a whole
really activities.
There's like chapter after chapter, in the book. So sleeping is awesome. I did this experiment before there was Fitbits. NASA, they called it an ActiWatch. You had to wear this watch and these temperature sensors, and they monitored like how well you slept on Earth, and then they monitored how well I slept in space. And on Earth, I was kind of up and down, and I'd wake and toss and turn. But in space, I was just flatline. I was kind of worried. I didn't know if I'd be able to sleep in space, but we were so tired. The days on that shuttle flight were so busy. I mean, it was literally every minute you're working. And even though you're not like running, there's no gravity, but you're just working. And so I slept really well. And the beauty of being in space, you can take your sleeping bag and put it on the wall or on the ceiling. It doesn't matter. But I would wear like blinders or whatever, to cover my eyes, which I don't do on Earth, but in space you needed that because the lights are on and stuff. So sleeping is really good. Eating, you were asked about eating. Eating was actually fun in space. It's not, fresh food. It's kind of like military rations. They call them MREs in the US military. They're just green bags of food, meat, vegetables, soup, dessert, whatever. You can just rip it open and eat it. Or there's some dehydrated food where it's like a plastic container. You plug it in, put some water in it, smash it around, wait about 15 minutes, and it turns into food.
So wait, you plug it in?
Plug it into a machine, you dial how many milliliters. It's 25, 50, 75, 100 milliliters. Hit the button. It says cold, it's really ambient or hot.
Yeah.
So if you want hot, if it's soup, you put in hot water. If it's strawberries, you put in cold water, and you smash it. I would spin it around to centrifuge it to get the water pushed against the side. And then it takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and then it turns into food.
Wow. So it's kind of a water diet, liquid diet. Do you lose weight when you come back?
So you lose weight as soon as you get into space. A lot of your fluid, like right now, there's a lot of fluid in our legs. Everybody's,
of course, yeah.
In space, that fluid kind of, and that's why astronauts' faces get puffy and their skin is kind of pulled back. And you basically you pee out all that fluid. The first couple of days in space, you have to pee a lot to get rid of all the fluid.
It must be weird.
I lost probably 1 kilo a month. But a lot of it, that you're eating healthy food. There's no McDonald's, and you're working out 2.5 hours a day on the space station. So it's kind of like I came back in really good shape. I had little skinny legs, chicken legs, but my upper body was in really good shape from all the weightlifting I did. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, probably I was going to ask. So the workout, it's like by weightlifting.
So we have 3 machines basically. There's a bike that you clip your like bike shoes, right? You clip them in, and there's no seat and there's no handlebar. You literally could just pedal. And we put some camera brackets as like to have something to hold on to. There's a treadmill that you wear a shoulder harness that pulls you down to the treadmill. So I got up to 130, I think, pounds. So it was it was about 70% of my body weight. And then there's a weightlifting machine, and it's uses vacuum tubes. So you're not actually lifting big weights. There's a vacuum tube, like a piston, and that's what generates the force. But you can generate a lot of force with that thing. I think probably 250 plus kilos of force. So any exercise you do in the gym here, bench press, deadlifts, squats, you can do in space. And those things are really important. Before I launched, I had a DEXA scan, which is this big full body x-ray. And then after I landed, they did it again. And I actually lost 0.0% of my total body or bone density, because your bones get frail in space.
Yeah.
And that kind of shocked me and it shocked the scientists. But the bottom line is, doing all that exercise in space, it helps. And plus I took vitamin D. I took a vitamin D tablet every day, because on Earth you get vitamin D from the sun, and you don't get that in space because you're in a can.
Of course.
Yeah. So
no sun.
To exercise and vitamin D, and I came back in great shape.
That's amazing. We already have a caller, Neil from New York. Let's have him. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Neil.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
Doing good.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, since there's been a lot of recent disclosure around UFOs, et cetera, I'm not going to get into the UFO part, but I'm more curious around the reverse engineering and like the black ops kind of stuff. And I know you're also an Air Force pilot. Is that right?
I was. I was an F-16 pilot, and then a test pilot. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question here is that, do you think that they're actually building there's supposed to be some new technology coming from all of this. Have you ever heard of anything or have you seen anything that would lead you to believe that, the United States is creating a more of a higher design military vehicle?
Well, so like I said, I was an F-16 pilot, and there have been some interesting things that have come out. The New York Times had that video. I've actually had a few folks on my podcast called Nathalie and I were talking about this before, yeah. Down to Earth with Terry Virts. And those episodes have been super popular with Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and others. But I don't know of anything that we're reverse engineering or anything like that. I just did an event for an F-35 graduation, and that is an incredible airplane. Like, it's amazing how good that airplane is. But I don't think it's reverse engineered from alien spaceships. I think it's just folks at Lockheed have spent some really good work, developing it. Well, I don't know anything about that specifically, but
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, but it's an interesting topic.
That's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. How about around the stealth fighter? Did you ever get a chance to actually see it, or did you ever get a chance to fly it, or
yeah?
I think I'm more curious on the difference between a regular fighter, a fighter, and
right.
I guess the stealth fighter.
Well, I never, the stealth fighter, the F-117, I never actually flew that. Actually, Nathalie, I was in France when that got announced. We were talking about my French Air Force Academy.
Exactly.
So I've seen it. I've been up close. That they use angles, so they change the angles of the wings and the engine inlets and stuff, so that the airplane reflects the radar and not back at the radar, but in a different direction. And they have special radar absorbent material, which is not foam, but it's this kind of a rubbery stuff so some of the radar energy gets absorbed in the airplane and some of it gets bounced off in a different direction. But yeah, I don't think that came from aliens. I think it just came from, smart engineering.
Right. No, I agree. And just to add on it, I'm not really interested more in the stealth. I guess I was more interested in the difference. I hear that there's a little bit difference to be able to fly that fighter as compared to a regular fighter.
Well,
they say that the technology is a lot harder, or something like that.
The thing about this, the F-117 specifically, like as a fighter pilot, I never really wanted to do that because their missions were kind of vanilla. They would just fly in a straight line. You don't want to be maneuvering a lot. So from the fighter pilot's point of view, it was a lot more fun to fly an F-16 because your job was there was a lot of maneuvering and manual flying. Whereas if you're just going in on a stealth run, you kind of want to go in a straight direction and not engage anybody else. So from the pilot's perspective, it was more fun. The F-16 was a lot more fun of an airplane, I think, at least talking to my buddies who flew the stealth. But it's a great capability to have if you ever, knock on wood, have to use it. So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're
Thanks.
not asking the real question that you have.
You can ask
it,
it,
Natalie.
The UFO question?
Yeah.
Yes, ask it.
I'm not going to get into the. I didn't want to get into the UFO question. I believe I was trying to find out in a different kind of way because I believe in the reverse technology and all of that, as opposed to the UFO itself. But thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So I think we can continue by asking someone who was like asking about the aliens.
Yeah. Well, I think I have a chapter about that and how to astronaut. So first of all, there's been some really interesting, videos that have come out, and there's some data out there that it's hard to explain. That's why I had guys on the pod. That's why I had, Chris and Lou on Down to Earth with Terry Virts. There's so many planets out there, and we've had several satellites that are planet hunters. They're finding planets around other stars way out in the galaxy. That you'd think that there's life, right? If there's life here, there's billions of planets. You'd think there's life other places. But when you look at life, and when I was in space, I had a chance to do a lot of ultrasounds on my brain and my heart. And when you just look how complicated life is, and one single cell of life has somewhere between millions and trillions of molecules in it. And I just don't think those molecules would just randomly assemble themselves and turn into a mouse or a bird or whatever. So I think if there is life, I think somebody has to get it started at least. And I say that from a scientific point of view, I'm a Christian, but I'm not saying that from a religious point of view. I'm just saying scientifically. So even though there's all these planets, I don't think life would just happen without somebody starting it. But even if there is life out there, those planets are really, 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 really far away. A light year is a long way away, and the nearest star is 4 light years away. And that's a triple system. So there's probably not any planets there. In fact, I think the most popular book, or one of the most popular books on Earth, is a Chinese science fiction book by Cixin Liu called The Three-Body Problem. And it's about life at that Alpha Proxima Centauri, the nearest star. And because there's 3 stars, the planets go from super hot melting to cold. And it's interesting how he talks about that. But the bottom line is, those things are a long way away. So the odds of being able to fly there are basically zero. I think the fastest object we've ever sent out was Voyager. And it's not nearly big enough to hold one person, much less a crew or a colony. And if it just went at the current speed straight to Alpha Centauri, it would take like 70,000 years. And of course it would be slowing down the whole way. So it would take longer than that. And anyway, yeah. Right. Wow. So that's,
So you haven't seen any
generations. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope this answered the people
that's
who
a
are
long
curious
answer.
about aliens. No, but I mean, people are curious. Actually, we have another caller, Nathalie from Turkey, who's calling us. Hi, Nathalie.
Wow.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. Good evening, Nathalie. Good evening, Terry. Nathalie, I love your show. Really enjoy listening to your show. We miss you. Good evening, Colonel Virts. This is Nathalie from Turkey. I have a question for you. Hello?
Yes, we're listening.
We're ready.
Can you hear me? Yes, it's an honor and a privilege to be talking to you. I have a question for you. a few months ago, we saw a lot of satellites going through the night sky here in Bodrum. And I looked on internet, and it was about the space program that Elon Musk is doing. And there were like hundreds of satellites in a row. Can you actually see them from where you are in space? Or do you see how crowded it is with all the satellites around the Earth?
You can, that's a really important question, actually. So you can see satellites from the International Space Station. You just see a little white dot moving. It has to be in the right situation where it can't be in the middle of the day, because then it's so bright your eyes won't notice it. Just like why you can't see stars during the day. But it can't be in the middle of the night, because the satellite will be in the shade and the sun won't be shining on it. So it has to be kind of dawn or dusk. And you can see satellites. And I did a lot of time-lapse videos. And so a lot of times I wouldn't see it with my eye, and I'd watch the video and I'd see it on the camera afterwards, watching the playback. And it was always like, wow, there's a lot of satellites out there. The problem with Starlink and Elon Musk, and there's also other companies that want to do this. I think Blue Origin wants to do it. I think Airbus wants to do it. There's several companies that want to put up tens of thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit. And they're going to provide internet access around the world, which is great. The problem is they're creating giant clouds of thousands and thousands of satellites, which will turn into space debris in the long run. And those satellites will never come down. I actually had a guy named Hiro Virdi on my podcast a few weeks ago, and we talked about this problem. We're basically creating a mess in space that will be there for centuries. So people in the year 2300 and 2400 are going to be really mad at us for making that mess up in Earth orbit, which is what we're doing now.
Oh no! There were like hundreds of them. If they went in a row, and we thought, what are these? We thought they were night planes, and then eventually we knew it was the Elon Musk project, and there's already like 100 in a row going through around the Earth. So it was quite impressive, but I didn't know how messy it was up there. So it's good to know.
Thank you, Nathalie, for the question.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good evening in Turkey. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Terry. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So we're about to take our first break. I'm talking with Colonel Terry Virts, a real-life astronaut. So if you have any questions, send them in or call us live. And we'll be back just after the break. Bye for now.
You're listening to Say Yes, Be Happy. To reach our show today, we invite you to phone in to 1-866-472-5788. That's 1-866-472-5788. Or send an email to bvg@thebon-vivantgirl.com. Now, back to Say Yes, Be Happy.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nathalie Botros, your host, and I'm talking with Colonel Terry Virts, who has been to space several times and actually spent more than 7 months in total in space. So he's answering all our questions. And just before the break, we discussed about the challenges to be in space, the physical challenges. And actually, I would like to know if there were any mental challenges to be there, because it must be like kind of a different environment for you.
That's a great question. That's actually the most important question. And when we are hiring astronauts, the last thing I did when I retired from NASA about 5 years ago, we were getting ready to hire a class. And I always look for the mental aspect. There's a lot of technically competent people. There's a lot of smart engineers and good fighter pilots and stuff. But it's that ability to get along with other people and be stuck in a tin can for months. And, when things go bad, you don't want to freak out. In Hollywood, the astronauts are always yelling and screaming and but that's not the guy you want to be in space with, right? You want somebody who's going to be calm and not freak out too much when something goes wrong. So that aspect is a big deal. And actually, during my last space flight, a few months into it, well, before we launched, a cargo ship blew up. A few months into it, another cargo ship blew up. And then a few months later, a SpaceX cargo ship blew up. So NASA lost this ISS lost 3 spaceships in 8 months. It was a bad time. And when the middle one blew up, the Russian Progress, they decided to delay our replacement crew because they launched on the same rocket and they wanted to do the safety investigation to make sure that the same problem wasn't going to happen to the crew. And when they delayed our replacement crew, they delayed our return to Earth. So they basically said, hey guys, you're stuck in space and we don't know how long it's going to be.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. And so, we were ready to come home. We had plans for the summer. We had families. And anyway, it was mentally, that could have been a challenging time. And there's been a few times where, astronauts get told, hey, you're going to be delayed. And a lot of times they struggle and they're like, I'm ready to go. But our crew handled it really well. And it was because of our attitude. And the attitude was, we've got the rest of our lives on Earth. Let's just make the most of it while we're here in space. And that was something that really got us through. It was ironic. It was a lot like being stuck in COVID last year. I actually wrote about this. I did a lot of interviews and videos about it. That experience of getting stuck in space, low on supplies, you don't know when it's going to end. In a lot of ways, it was similar to what we went through with COVID.
Yeah, that stress, I can imagine. And once all this is over, you come down to Earth. I'm sure you have challenges too, because for you, for example, one of your missions, you stayed how long? 200 days.
Yeah.
Orbiting and then coming back without gravity, weightless, and then coming back and then being able to walk. That must be a big adjustment, right?
It was. So there's a couple things that you feel when you come back from space. One is heavy. You feel very heavy. I remember I was the last guy out of the shuttle and they came in, they said, hey, Terry, it's time to get out. So I grabbed my helmet and I was like, be careful. This thing weighs 500 pounds. But then I was sitting in a seat. Once you get out of the seat and you're walking around, it's like, man, the walls are spinning. You're dizzy. It is not easy to, just the dizziness. I wanted somebody next to me. I never fell, but I kind of felt like I might. So I always wanted a handrail or somebody next to me. And then you feel like you were just in space. So I tell this story. I got back to Earth. We went to the doctors, did our medical tests, got reunited with my family, shut the space shuttle down. I was finally back in my room 3 or 4 hours later. So I sat down on the bed and I turned on the TV, turned on CNN, and the talking head was like, blah, 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 talking about whatever gossip there was in 2010. And it was like fingernails on a chalkboard. I literally had to turn the TV off within 30 seconds. And because I remember thinking, that's so meaningless. Why are we filling our brains with all this noise? I was just in outer space, looking at the beautiful planet below. Yeah. Thinking all these thoughts about world peace. And then I come down and they're talking about blah, 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 blah. And so there's a lot of noise that comes in through these things, Yeah.
Phones and all the electronics that we use and the kids use, unfortunately, more and more.
Instagram and whatever, Twitter, some of those are just hate channels. And so it really struck me how we need to figure out, and you need to be connected. I get that, but you need to figure out how to filter out the noise and use all that tech wisely.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I had someone sending me a question about this before. Do you get kind of a awakening, lightning when you're in space? Because you're surrounded just by beauty, basically,
Yeah.
You have this calm, I presume, now.
Yeah, I got to film a movie. The best thing I did during my career, 16 years at NASA, was film an IMAX movie called A Beautiful Planet. And that's what kind of got me the filmmaking bug. But it's a well-named movie. It's a beautiful planet. And to be in outer space, looking back and go, hey, there's my planet over there, and I'm not on it. That was a pretty emotionally profound moment.
I can't imagine.
And also to look out into the galaxy at nighttime, turn all the lights off, let your eyes adjust, look away from Earth. And man, there's a lot of stars in our galaxy. It's pretty awesome. So that perspective for me. And I remember thinking, man, that planet's been around for 1 billion years. It's going to be around for 1 billion more or more. You just don't need to get too uptight about things.
Yeah.
After seeing Earth, it's hard to get impressed.
Yeah,
It's certainly like celebrity doesn't impress me. I'm impressed by talent and the amazing things people do and people developing malaria vaccines or whatever. I'm impressed by those kind of things, but not by celebrity, which is kind of what we worship now.
Exactly. Unfortunately, yes.
It's not healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so can we say that you felt like a spiritual experience out of this?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm a Christian and that didn't change things. Although I think I'm a lot less black and white. It was easy before to go that whatever, everything was black and white. And I'm not like that at all. I have very open views about most things. There's some things that are just wrong and there's no two ways to look at it, but about most things there's multiple opinions, and it's hard. Like when it comes to politics, I'm not ideological at all. I just want to do the right thing. Let's figure out how to do things smartly. And unfortunately in America, of course, we have a real problem with division.
Yeah.
And I think if my Twitter, I changed my Twitter or whatever homepage a couple years ago. It said, "In God I trust, everybody else has to bring data." And the point of that was, I don't want to be ideological about something. I just want to be smart about making decisions and do things that make sense and not just because, I have an ideology one way or another. That's something that we need to figure out how to fix this because it's kind of tearing us apart.
Of course. No, I totally agree. And I think you're trying to spread that message actually right now. Through your talks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it seems like in the world there's two different paths. One of them is authoritarian 1984 Big Brother, and the other one is democracy, freedom, whatever. And we need we're going to go in one way or the other. And I think human life, life is much better for humans when you pick the one direction and not the other. So we need to figure out, those are kind of the big, not serious questions that we need to get right. Because if we don't, the world goes in a different direction. And we've seen the world go in the wrong direction last century. And just because we fixed it once doesn't mean it won't happen again. We need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And I think it's scary that even with COVID, like where the whole world lived the same experience, people are still not in peace. Like it's still like not. It's scary.
We missed such an opportunity during COVID. That was a chance for us all to come together and, hey, let's work to fix this thing together rather than blaming. And that was a massively missed opportunity in 2020 for countries to work together.
Yeah, it's sad. So let's go back to our questions. You come back to Earth. Yeah, physically there's a challenge, but mentally, I want you to talk about the space brain.
So this is something we talk about at NASA.
Yeah.
And it's true in the air. We used to say same thing flying jets, that your IQ drops by a half. So once you strap into the seat, your IQ is half of what it was before, because you're in an environment that's confusing. It's you're disoriented, you're focused on certain things. You just can't think as much as you could before. It's kind of like on Earth. If there's a crying baby, your brain is not going to work because you're flustered and what's happening here. You get like that in space. And I think in part it's because you're weightless. And so your brain is trying to figure out how to deal with floating. In part it's because of carbon dioxide. The atmosphere on the space station, I think, has 30 times as much carbon dioxide in it as we do down here on Earth. And CO2 makes you, I wrote a chapter about how to tell your CO2 symptoms. Yeah. It just makes you confused and kind of cranky, and it's not fun. And, for 200 days. And then there's just other things. I remember I stuck my head, I had to get some parts out for a Russian piece of equipment. And it was a big, like the size of a dishwasher, full of parts, and they were all written in Russian. They all looked the same. And I felt like I spent hours trying to find this one part. My brain just shut down. So this idea of space brain where, I mean, you can function, you can work, but not as well as you could in a normal situation is very real. I did a payload called, I think it was Cognition, where every month I had to do this like mental function test. It was memory and how fast did I react, and it was like a psychologist test on your brain. How well is it working? And they don't work as well in space as they do on Earth, but you get used to it. I think with experience you can overcome it. But the space brain is a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, talking about space brain and your book, How to Astronaut: An Insider's Guide to Living Planet Earth. I think we should talk a little bit about the book. I know that everybody wants to know about your opinion on space tourism, but they should know about this book, which is like quite an amazing book. And can we like just dig in a little bit? So yeah, exactly.
So How to Astronaut, I came up with the idea a couple years ago, but I basically wanted to write a book that would be fun and accessible to everybody. I didn't want to write another memoir. This is not a memoir. I didn't want to write, because there's been 100 of those written. And I didn't want to write like a space nerd technical book. So I wrote it in short chapters. I think there's 51 chapters in here. They're all, 5 to 10 minute reads. They're not 50-page chapters. They're usually 3, 4, 5 pages. And it's about some topics that you would think of, like how do you handle emergencies in the space shuttle, a bunch of how do you do spacewalk chapters, how do you eat in space, how do you sleep in space, how do you go to the bathroom in space, so stuff you'd expect.
Yeah.
I also wrote some chapters that you wouldn't necessarily expect on are there aliens, what do you do with a dead body if your crewmate dies,
yeah.
how to time travel. There's a few fun, I have to look through the list of things, but the goal was for you to laugh and say, wow. Those were kind of my two objectives. And also for it to be for anybody, like not men, women, young, old, whatever. I didn't want to write just a space crowd niche book. That was the goal.
I think it's an easy read, and it's very informative, that's what I love about it. And okay, so because I keep getting the questions about space tourism. Let's talk.
By the way, when I started it, I didn't have that, but right at the end, the publisher was like, hey, we need a chapter on space tourism. So I cranked that out in a day. Yeah. So
what are your thoughts about space tourism?
Well, I think it's here. I think it's, it's been a long time coming. I think it's a fun thing. I'm glad that more people are getting to go. There's really two types. There's the Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin go up and down, and then you get a few minutes of weightlessness and you come right back down. The SpaceX space tourism is much different because they're actually sending people in a capsule into orbit, and that's an entirely different experience. And they're actually going to send people to the International Space Station. There's a company called Axiom that is going to buy SpaceX capsules and send private paying people to the International Space Station. The Russians my crewmate Anton Shkaplerov, whom I flew with, just launched last week with a Russian director and actress. They're going to make a movie on the space station, which is pretty cool. I always said, I'm done flying in space, but if I could go make a movie there, I'd go do that.
That would be fun.
Yeah, because I love directing and filmmaking. So anyway, I think in general, it's a good thing. The more people who see space, that's good. I think that rich people spending money to do this pays for a lot of middle-class engineer jobs, and SpaceX and Blue Origin employees appreciate having that work. And then the work that they're doing is going to also apply to bigger rockets, satellites that go into orbit, and so on. So the money that gets spent on the space tourism helps those companies fund bigger and more important projects. So I think it's a good thing. The bottom line is it's not 100% safe, and I worry that people kind of get lulled into this. Well, it worked once, it'll work again, and there's a lot of risk with all of these things, and they don't necessarily come out in the public as often as you would want. So that's the one thing if you're going to go fly in space, enjoy it. If I hadn't done it, I would want to do it myself, but you have to have your eyes wide open. This is not United Airlines from London to New York. This is, it's a whole nother level of risk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's risky. I wouldn't go, even if you offer me. Not that anyone is offering me, but right. I think it's risky. But anyway,
so you could do the podcast from space.
Imagine we can do it together.
We could do, yeah. We could go up there and film it in space.
Oh my God! Like we will float.
Yeah, I'll give you. So cool. I'll give you some lessons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like that. Let's do that.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to space. So, but in space, you didn't just stay there, worked out. You did something amazing. You took a lot of pictures. And I know that you took more than 300,000 pictures and you made a book out of it.
I did. Yeah.
The book is like View from Above. Actually, your foreword was written by Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
And tell us about it. Like, how were you always a fan of photography, or you said, "Oh, this is so beautiful, I have to take pictures"?
No, growing up, I had a camera. My parents got me a camera, so it was, you had to put film in it and then send the film off, and it would come back 2 weeks later.
Wait.
So, but I learned about aperture and shutter speed and exposure and focus and different lenses. I learned all that stuff, which was great. And I just love it. I was the kind of dad, Dad, stop taking pictures. So I am a camera guy, and some astronauts are like that. Don Pettit was kind of my mentor. He has a great book out called Spaceborne. It's an amazing space photography book. So he was kind of my example that I followed. And I took all these pictures in part because I love taking pictures, in part because I was working on that movie, A Beautiful Planet, and a lot of them I took for that film. But when I got back and I waited about a year, and I said, it's time for me to leave NASA. There's other things I want to do in life. I've already done everything there is to do here. And the first thing I did was write that book for National Geographic. It's also a word book. It's not just photography, but that was a great book. I love View from Above. How to Astronaut is more, it's words, it's stories. It's not a photography book, but the View from Above is stories and also photography.
It must be hard among, I think it was 359,000 pictures, like something like that.
319. There's some poor guy at the Johnson Space Center had
counted.
Yeah.
And then you had to choose 300 for this book. That must be challenging too.
Yes. I had a great photo editor, Kate Wilson. And she helped me narrow it down, and she did all the photoshopping, and,
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So during the break, we were talking about your upcoming projects. You're going to write a book for kids, and I love that. Can we talk about it?
So I want to write a book. It was basically Ask an Astronaut 100 Questions. The title is still in work, but it's going to be a short illustrated book. We're kind of thinking 10 to 12-year-old. It'll be for anybody. Adults can look at it too. It's going to be a lot of questions that I answer, 1 or 2 paragraphs with some illustrations. All the questions you would have about how the space shuttle worked, how do you launch on rockets, what's it like to live in space, about planets, about galaxies. So it's kind of a 100-question book about space for kids. But that's what motivated me. And I just want to write something that kids can enjoy and have fun and get excited about space, but also read. I don't care what they're reading. They just need to read about something. And I read as a kid. I used to love reading. English books made my head explode. I hated them. I was literally the least likely to write a book. I got C's in English class. I still apologize to my English. Whenever I have a chance, I'm sorry, Miss Herman, and I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell. I was a terrible student. And here I am, an author. I've got my fifth book done, actually. And I never would have expected that, but it's because I'm writing about things I care about and I'm passionate about. I wrote a screenplay. I've written a bunch of stuff, and I never would have expected that as a kid. I'm kind of weird. I like the right brain and left brain. I was a applied math major in college, but I was also a French minor, as we were talking before.
Yeah.
So I like the technical stuff and I like the artistic stuff, but that's important for kids to read. If you're a parent, man, if you only do one thing for your kids, have them read anything that they like. That's super important.
it's true that nowadays kids, like, unfortunately, I mean, like, it's a blessing to have technology for some reasons.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's really doesn't let kids to be out, even to play. Like, they
Right.
spend their day in
Right.
front of that screen. So I have a friend who told me, like, if you want to punish a kid and who wants to watch TV, just put in mute and put the subtitles so they will have to read. It's a good one, right?
Or on TikTok, you turn the volume off and just have the subtitles on.
Exactly. So they have to read about it at least. But
that is funny.
We have to like really encourage the kids to read, because like they have everything so easy. Whenever I talk about a book, did they do a movie about it? Like that's the first question.
It's funny. Anyway, so, some kids are readers, some kids aren't. I'm reading The Great Gatsby right now. My daughter's an English major, and I just read Of Mice and Men. And it's fun to read actual literature, classic literature. Normally I would read like technicals. I'm reading a book about finance because I'm doing a startup business, and that's not like literature. So it's fun to read fiction where you have to think about characters and stuff like that.
No, it's true. So Terry, question. I mean, I know that our listeners can find you on your podcast, Down to Earth with Terry Virts, but otherwise, how they can follow you? I mean, after like criticizing social media, but they can have access to your website. Tell us a bit how they can find you.
So I have a website called terryvirts.com. I have the podcast Down to Earth with Terry Virts. And I'm on Twitter at AstroTerry, and Instagram is Astro_Terry. So I try and tweet about fun things about what's going on in space, or kind of random things. I kind of made fun of Instagram and Facebook for going down last couple weeks ago. I have a social media person who does it. She's amazing. She's awesome. And this thing got like 1.5 million.
I know. I saw that.
It was huge.
So funny.
People love making fun of Instagram and Facebook. So that was funny.
Yeah. But I mean, it's true that like it shut down for 4 hours or 6 hours, and people were like frozen. Like they didn't know how to communicate anymore.
I know it was kind of funny. So it was what it was. So yeah. Yeah.
So Terry, thank you so much for being my guest. And I say yes, be happy. You say, don't say no.
Exactly.
So I guess like our messages are aligned, and we're trying to spread positivity and reality into this world.
Yeah.
I hope we will follow up, and I hope to have you again on my show soon with new projects. And listeners, thank you so much for listening. And I see you next Tuesday, live as usual at 12 noon Eastern time and 9 a.m. Pacific time. Bye, everyone, and have a great week.
A bientôt, Nathalie.
A bientôt.
What do you have to lose? Say yes. Be happy.